Students, in the last class we have discussed fungi reproduction. In this class we are going to discuss different classes of fungi. So based on morphology of mycelium, mode of spore formation and fruiting bodies, fungi is mainly classified into 4 groups. They are phycomycetes, ascomycetes, basidiomycetes and deuteromycetes. So first should understand what is based on morphology of mycelium. Morphology is nothing but external structure, based on the external structure of the mycelium. So what is mycelium? Usually the fungi consist of long, slender, thread-like structures called hyphae. The network of hyphae is called mycelium, that we already discussed in the last class. So the network of hyphae is called mycelium. What is hyphae? The fungi consist of long, slender, thread-like structures called hyphae. The network of hyphae is called mycelium. So based on the morphology of the mycelium, mode of spore formation. So how the spores are formed in that particular group. Sometimes the spores are formed exogenously, which means externally. In some fungi, the spores are formed endogenously, that is within the sporangium. So based on that, mode of spore formation and also fruiting bodies. What is fruiting bodies? Spores are formed in the special structures called fruiting bodies. So what are fruiting bodies? Spores are formed in the special structures called fruiting bodies. So based on morphology of mycelium, mode of spore formation and fruiting bodies, kingdom fungi is mainly classified into 4 groups. They are phycomycetes, ascomycetes, basidiomycetes and deuteromycetes. So first we are going to discuss phycomycetes. The members of the phycomycetes is also called algal fungi. So why it is called algal fungi? Because if you see the characteristics of the phycomycetes, those characteristics are similar to that of the algae, hence it is called algal fungi. Next, they are found in aquatic habitats on decaying wood in moist and damp places as obligate parasites on plant. So they usually live in water bodies. These fungi usually live in water bodies and also on decaying woods. Decaying means here the wood is about to degrade. So decaying wood in moist and damp places, wet places as and also they also live as obligate parasites on plants. You know that parasites are the organisms, they depend on other organisms for their food. So the fungi live as parasites. So fungi depend on plants for the food. Here they live as obligate parasites on plants. Here the fungi is the parasite. They usually depend on plants for their food. So they usually live in damp places, that is moist and damp places, that is wet places. They found in aquatic habitats, that is in the water bodies, and also they live as obligate parasites. In phycomycetes, the mycelium is aseptate and cenocytic. What is aseptate here? Here, if you see the structure of the fungi here, you cannot find the cross walls in case of aseptate. Here cross walls are absent. If the cross walls are present like this, then it is called septate. This is septate. This is aseptate. You see the fungi like this. If you see, the fungi will be like this. So here, if you find the cross walls, then it is called septate. This is septate. If cross walls are absent, then it is called aseptate. So the mycelium is aseptate and cenocytic. What is cenocytic? Multinucleated condition is called cenocytic condition. So how the multinucleated cell is formed? Here the karyokinesis is not followed by cytokinesis. What is karyokinesis? Division of nucleus is called karyokinesis. Division of cytoplasm is called cytokinesis. Here cenocytic means multinucleated cell is formed. Here the nucleus is undergoing cell division. So the cell which is having many nucleus is called cenocytic. So the most of the cases, the members of the phycomycetes has aseptate and cenocytic. The mycelium is aseptate and cenocytic. Next, asexual reproduction takes place by zoospores or aplanospores. So we already discussed in the last class different types of spores. Asexual spores are 4 types and sexual spores are 4 types. We already discussed. Asexual spores are aplanospores, conidiospores, sporangiospores, zoospores. These 4 are asexual spores. Sexual spores are oospores, zygospores, ascospores and basidiospores. These are the sexual spores. Now, how the asexual reproduction takes place in case of phycomycetes? In phycomycetes, asexual reproduction takes place by zoospores or by aplanospores. Here the zoospores are motile. Once the spores are formed, the spores can move from one place to the other place. So, zoospores are motile. Motile means they can move. Aplanospores are non-motile. They cannot move. That you should remember. Here asexual reproduction in phycomycetes takes place by zoospores and aplanospores. Zoospores are motile, aplanospores are non-motile. Now coming to here, how the spores are formed. We already discussed on what basis the fungi is classified into 4 groups based on morphology of the mycelium, mode of spore formation and fruiting bodies, how the spores are formed, whether the spores are produced endogenously or exogenously. Here, in case of phycomycetes, the spores are formed endogenously within the sporangium. So, sporangium is a structure which can hold the spores. So, here the spores are formed within the sporangium. Next, now coming to the sexual reproduction. How the sexual reproduction takes place? Sexual reproduction always takes place by the fusion of male and female gametes. Here, the male gamete can be fused with the female gamete, results in the formation of a special structure called zygospores. How the zygospores are formed? The male gamete can be fused with the female gamete. Here, the zygospores are formed by the fusion of 2 gametes. So, in case of higher organisms like plants, animals and human beings, zygote is formed. So, the male gamete can be fused with the female gamete, results in the formation of zygote. Zygote develops into embryo, embryo develops into fetus. In case of higher organisms. But in case of lower organisms, here like fungi, algae, what happens? The 2 gametes can be fused and which forms a special structure called zygospores. Here you should not call zygote, it is a zygospore. Next, the gametes may be similar or dissimilar in morphology. If you see the gametes, external structure of the gamete, which may be similar or dissimilar. Both male and female gametes will be may be similar or both may be dissimilar. One may be large, one may be small, or 2 may be very small, or 2 may be large. So the gametes may be similar or dissimilar in morphology. So the reproduction in fungi takes place by isogamous, anisogamous and oogamous. So, what is isogamous? If the fusion that takes, you know that in sexual reproduction, the 2 gametes can be fused. So, one of the male gamete can be fused with the female gamete, results in the formation of zygospores. Here, isogamous. What is isogamous? If the fusion takes place between the 2 similar gametes, then it is called isogamous. Anisogamous. If the fusion takes place between the 2 dissimilar gametes, one may be large, one may be small, like that. So then it is called anisogamous. Next, oogamous. The fusion that takes place between the small motile male gamete and large non-motile female gamete is called oogamous. Once again, here the sexual reproduction in fungi takes place by 3 means, that is isogamous, anisogamous and oogamous. So what is isogamous? The fusion that takes place between the 2 similar gametes. Here the 2 gametes are similar, then it is called isogamous. Anisogamous. Here the fusion takes place between the 2 dissimilar gametes. One may be small, one may be large, or the structure may be different, like this. That is called anisogamous. Now oogamous. Here the fusion takes place between the small motile male gamete, and large non-motile female gamete. Then it is called oogamous. So any type of means of reproduction that takes place in case of fungi, which may be isogamous, or anisogamous, or oogamous. So examples of the phycomycetes are mucor, rhizopus, albugo. Here the rhizopus is nothing but bread mold. I already said no, when you heat the bread and if you put some water, what happens? The bread can, on the bread, the fungi will grow. Normally aspergillus will grow. So, or rhizopus will grow. So here that fungi is called rhizopus. Albugo is a parasitic fungi on mustard. Mustard means haswe. So if you see the mustard leaves, so you can find the white spots on the leaves. That is mainly due to albugo. So these are the different types of fungi. So after phycomycetes, we are going to discuss the other three groups, that is ascomycetes, basidiomycetes and deuteromycetes. First we will discuss ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. Ascomycetes, the members of the ascomycetes usually called sac fungi, SAC, because they can form the sac-like structure, hence it is called sac fungi. So they are unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular means they are having only single cell. The organisms in the ascomycetes are unicellular or multicellular. The best example for the unicellular fungi is the yeast, that is Saccharomyces. The scientific name for the yeast is Saccharomyces. So they may be unicellular or multicellular. Multicellular means they are the fungal body consists of number of cells. Example, penicillium. So where they can grow? Usually they are saprophytic, decomposers, parasites or caprophilous. Now coming to the, after phycomycetes we are going to discuss ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. Ascomycetes, the members of the ascomycetes usually called sac fungi because these organisms can produce the sac-like structure, hence they is called sac fungi. They are unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular means they contain only single cell. The best example for the unicellular fungi is the yeast. And multicellular, they contain number of cells. Example, penicillium. Now, the organisms of the ascomycetes are saprophytic or decomposers or parasites or caprophilous. Saprophytic means they depend on dead and decaying organisms for their food, for their survival. They are called as saprophytes. Decomposers, they can degrade the organic material. So, they are called decomposers. So, the members of the ascomycetes are either saprophytic or decomposers or parasitic or caprophilous. So what are parasitic? Parasitic means they depend on other plants and animals or other living organisms. The fungi which depend on other organisms like plants and animals, they are called as parasitic or caprophilous. Caprophilous means they usually grow on dung. Cow dung, okay, normally. So they are called as caprophilous. So they may be saprophytic or decomposers or parasitic or caprophilous. So caprophilous fungi comes under ascomycetes. What do you understand by caprophilous? The fungi which grow on dung called caprophilous. Now the mycelium is branched and septate. In case of phycomycetes it is aseptate. Cross walls are absent, but here cross walls are present and it is branched. Here, for example, this is the mycelium. You can find it is branched and septate. Cross walls are present like this. So that is about branched and septate. You know mycelium, we already discussed. Now, asexual spores are called conidiospores, which are produced exogenously on special hyphae called conidiophores. So that conidia on germination gives rise to mycelium. Here you should remember, we already discussed different types of spores are aplanospores, juice spores, conidiospores, sporangiospores. These are all asexual spores. Ascomycetes, the members of the ascomycetes usually produce the special type of spores, asexual spores called conidiospores. So asexual spores are called conidiospores in case of ascomycetes. In case of phycomycetes, asexual spores are aplanospores or juice spores. That you should remember. Asexual spores are conidiospores or conidia, which are produced exogenously, that is outside, on special hyphae called conidiophores. Conidiophores, for example, this is the conidiophore and you can find the conidiospores like this. This structure is called conidiophore. This is called conidiospore. So asexual spores are conidiospores, which are produced exogenously outside on the special hyphae called conidiophores. This Conidiospores on germination gives rise to mycelium. This is how the asexual reproduction takes place in case of ascomycetes. So, in case of ascomycetes, asexual reproduction takes place by the formation of spores called conidiospores. Conidiospores are formed on the special structures called conidiophores. So, conidiophores can bear the conidiospores. That conidia or conidiospores on germination gives rise to mycelium. Now, coming to the sexual reproduction. So, during sexual reproduction, dikaryon is formed. So, what is dikaryon? Whenever the two compatible hyphae come in contact with each other, the walls will be dissolved, the nucleus cannot be fused for some time. So, later the nucleus can be fused. So, the single cell which contains two nuclei is called dikaryon. So, the common feature that exists between these ascomycetes and basidiomycetes is the formation of dikaryon. So, we already discussed how the dikaryon will be formed in the last class. So, whenever the two compatible hyphae come in contact with each other, the cross walls between the two hyphae will be dissolved, but nucleus cannot be dissolved. Two nuclei will be present in the single cell, then it is called dikaryon. Later, the nucleus can be fused, which forms the zygote, which undergoes meiosis. This takes place later. So, during sexual reproduction, dikaryon is formed. Next, sexual spores are ascospores. So, asexual spores are conidiospores or conidia in case of ascomycetes. Sexual spores are ascospores. Ascospores which are produced endogenously. Very important. The sexual spores are produced endogenously in a sac-like structure called asci. Asci. Asci is the plural. Singular form ascus. Ascus. Ascus is the singular form. Asci is the plural form. So, sexual spores are called ascospores. Ascospores are produced endogenously. Conidiospores are produced exogenously. So, should remember, in case of ascomycetes, asexual spores are conidiospores which are formed exogenously on special structures called conidiophores. In ascomycetes, the sexual spores are called ascospores. Ascospores are formed endogenously in sac-like structure called ascus. Ascus is the singular form, asci is the plural form. So, the asci are arranged in a fruiting body called ascocarp. These asci are arranged in a fruiting body called ascocarp. So, ascocarp contain ascus. Ascus contains ascospores. For example, if you take, this is the ascocarp. This is the ascocarp. And ascus, this is the ascus. And sexual spores are called ascospores. For your understanding, I am explaining this like this. So, this cup-like structure is called ascocarp, and this is called ascus. Within the ascus you can find the ascospores. This is how the ascospores are produced. Ascospores are formed endogenously in the cup-like structure called ascus. This is cup-like structure called ascus. So, ascocarp contain ascus. Ascus contains ascospores. So, ascospores are present in these are the ascospores. This structure is called, this cup-like structure is called ascus. This structure is called ascocarp. So, ascospores are present in the ascus, and the ascus are arranged in a fruiting body called ascocarp. So, ascocarp contain ascus, ascus contains ascospores. In other words, the ascospores are present in the ascus, and the ascus is the singular form, the plural form is the asci. The asci are arranged in a fruiting body called ascocarp. So, this is how the sexual reproduction takes place in case of ascomycetes. So examples: Aspergillus, Candida, Clavicepsis, Saccharomyces, Penicillium, Neurospora. These are the examples of ascomycetes. Neurospora is widely used in the biochemical and genetic studies. Next, morels and truffles are edible, that is eatable. Morels and truffles comes under ascomycetes, which are edible. So this is about ascomycetes. Now coming to the basidiomycetes. So the members of the basidiomycetes usually called club fungi. They are called club fungi. Phycomycetes members are called algal fungi. Ascomycetes members are called sac fungi. The members of the basidiomycetes are called club fungi. The most common forms of the basidiomycetes are mushrooms, bracket fungi, puffballs. These are the most common forms in case of basidiomycetes. So mushrooms comes under basidiomycetes. Mushrooms also fungi, which comes under a special class called basidiomycetes. Next, they grow in soil, on logs and tree stumps. Logs means woods, cut woods. So they grow in soil, on logs and tree stumps in living plant bodies as parasites. So the members of the basidiomycetes also live as parasites. Example: rusts and smuts. These are the examples. Next, mycelium is septate and branched like that of the ascomycetes. So this is again one of the common feature, ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. The mycelium is branched and septate. Here also branched and septate. We already discussed what is branched, which contains the branches, and septate means they contain cross walls. Next, asexual spores are not found. Important one. Asexual spores are not found, but vegetative reproduction takes place by fragmentation. You know, we already discussed fungi reproduction. In fungal reproduction, we discussed the fungi reproduce by three different means: vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Here, asexual reproduction is absent in case of basidiomycetes. Only sexual reproduction is present and vegetative reproduction takes place by fragmentation. So asexual spores are not found. So the asexual spores are aplanospores, conidiospores, zoospores, sporangiospores. All these four spores you cannot find in case of basidiomycetes. In case of phycomycetes, the asexual spores are aplanospores and zoospores. In case of ascomycetes, the asexual spores are conidiospores. Now coming to the sexual reproduction. In case of basidiomycetes, the sex organs are absent. You may ask, if the sex organs are absent, how the sexual reproduction takes place? Here, whenever the two compatible hyphae come in contact with each other, plasmogamy takes place. What is plasmogamy? Fusion of protoplast is called plasmogamy. So plasmogamy is by fusion of two vegetative cells or somatic cells of primary mycelium. So whenever the two hyphae come in contact with each other, this is one hyphae, this is the another hyphae, come in contact with each other, what happens? Here the plasmogamy takes place. First the cross walls will be dissolved, it becomes one. The nuclei is present here. The nucleus cannot be fused. First what happens? Plasmogamy takes place. What is plasmogamy? Fusion of protoplasm is called plasmogamy. So here sex organs are absent, but plasmogamy is by fusion of two vegetative or somatic cells. This is one hyphae, this is the another hyphae. Whenever the two compatible hyphae come in contact with each other, plasmogamy takes place. That is, fusion of protoplasm takes place between these two hyphae, that is between the primary mycelium. So whenever the two hyphae come in contact with each other, once the plasmogamy is completed, what is the result? This results in the formation of dikaryon. So here two nuclei are present in the, whenever the two cells will combine, it forms the single cell. Now these two cells become combined and forms the single cell. This single cell contains the two nuclei, hence it is called dikaryon. The same thing that you can find in case of ascomycetes also. So dikaryon is formed and produces a dikaryotic secondary mycelium. Now this can produce the secondary mycelium. So this is the primary mycelium. It can produce the, for example, it can produce the secondary mycelium like this. The secondary mycelium gives rise to sexual spores called basidiospores. Now, it can produce the basidiospores like this. It can produce the basidiospores. Right? So, this results in the formation of dikaryon and produces a dikaryotic secondary mycelium. The secondary mycelium gives rise to sexual spores called basidiospores. So, asexual spores are absent in basidiomycetes and sexual spores are present. What are the sexual spores? Basidiospores. The sexual spores in case of ascomycetes is ascospores. In case of basidiomycetes is basidiospores. The name itself indicates. So, the secondary mycelium gives rise to sexual spores called basidiospores which are formed exogenously on basidia. The basidia are arranged in fruiting bodies called basidiocarp. Here, ascospores are sexual spores which are formed endogenously. Here, basidiospores are sexual spores which are formed exogenously. Very important for the NEET exam. They asked many times. Ascospores are formed endogenously. Basidiospores are formed exogenously. Exogenous means outside the basidia. Sexual spores are called basidiospores. Basidiospores are formed in the basidium. The basidium are arranged in a fruiting bodies called basidiocarp. Here, the one thing you should remember, the sexual spores are called basidiospores which are formed exogenously, that is outside on the basidia. The basidia are arranged in fruiting bodies called basidiocarp. Examples of the basidiomycetes here: agaricus, stylago, Puccinia, Polyporus, Lycopodon. So, agaricus, mushroom, stylago, smut, Puccinia is nothing but rust, Polyporus is a bracket fungi, Lycopodon, puffball. So, these are the examples of the basidiomycetes. So, if you compare the sexual reproduction in ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, you can find almost similar structures, but the names different here. The ascocarp contains ascus. The ascus contains ascospores. Same here. Basidiocarp contains basidium. The basidium contains basidiospores. So, this is how the reproduction takes place in case of basidiomycetes, sexual reproduction.